I'm Leanne Tran, psychologist who's worked with families whose kids don't fit the mould for almost 20 years. I've worked with children for decades, but I know parents are the real change makers when it comes to their kids. Having 3 kids of my own means I know it's not easy. Parent Like a Psychologist is all about simplifying how you support your kids with psychology information filtered through years of experience to take you from overwhelmed to confident. Come on in.
Traveling with kids can be stressful. Traveling with kids who have anxiety, a strong need for control, or who get bored easily, that can feel like an Olympic level parenting challenge. But with the right mix of preparation, flexibility, and a few sneaky strategies, it can actually be, wait for it, enjoyable and fun. Today, I'm sharing the things that have made all the difference for our family trips. Hi, parents. Welcome back to another episode of Parent Like a Psychologist. I have just returned from a trip overseas to my family, with my family. Olympic level parenting challenges that kind of came to me as we were in Athens visiting the first Olympic stadium and all of that kind of thing, and seeing how much my kids loved it. But one kid loved it, the other was incredibly bored waiting. Um, but I actually prepared a lot of this episode before I left because I was just documenting the things that were running through my head as I prepared for the trip. And I travel a lot with my kids and generally find it goes really well. And I think these strategies have a big part to play. Um, I'm thinking back initially to a trip I'd been on in the past where I didn't really realize how worried about things one of my kids was. Um, and we were, a little while into the trip so we caught the plane overseas and we're on the bus trip somewhere. And then they started talking about how worried they were about the car and what would happen to the car. And I really didn't understand. But it turns out because they were quite little, then we'd got valet parking at the airport. And since that time, it had been running through my kid's mind that a stranger just took the car. And so my child was worried about, where is the car? How are we going to find it again? Are those people going to keep it safe? All of this stuff that didn't really even occur to me. Um, and so since then, I've been able to think a lot more about explaining things to the kids and what they might be thinking about, because as we know, the less anxious and the less stressed our kids are, the more they're able to enjoy themselves, but also problem solve and deal with all the other daily challenges. So travel's naturally full of unknowns. That is the exact thing that can be difficult for differently wired kids. But I think also it can be a really great opportunity to learn and stretch and grow through the enjoyment that can come with being out of the normal routine. So I want to start with talking about how preparation is your friend. Um, the things I do for this are schedule in advance, use visual supports, and have a bit of flexibility, but within a structure. So, in terms of scheduling in advance, kids do better when they know what is coming up. So, I prep my kids beforehand with a schedule so they understand what's going to happen. That generally is written now, but used to be in picture form when they were young. And it's just really so that the kids know what's going to happen on each day, whether it's a travel day or whether it's in a destination, whether there's activities planned or whether it's a free day. And it really kind of provides that overall scaffolding and I guess, framework for the kids to understand what it's going to be like, especially that they're out of routine. So it doesn't have to be complex. This is the thing. I usually use a table in a Word document, just with the date, what's happening, and then where we'll be. When the kids were younger, then I would put it in week format, so it looked more like a calendar to give that same look as a calendar so they could understand the passing of the days a bit better. But then I'd have pictures in there too about where we would be and what we would go and what it might look like. It doesn't have to be um, complex, it's just stuff you can search on Google and right click and copy. I put also the known details in there, but also when plans are flexible, as I mentioned before. So that means if we know we're doing something like we've got a booking or something else, you can put that in there. If the plans are flexible, you might be able to put in something like, a choice of the couple of things you might want to do in that area in terms of sightseeing and that kind of thing. So it shows there's some structure, but there's also a bit of flexibility as well. When I mentioned visual supports, yeah, so when my kids were younger, I used pictures or of things like, there would be a picture of a plane when it was a day we were catching a flight, or trains, of the hotel, or if we were going to a castle, thinking Japan there would be a picture of it or the beach or whatever. And so that it gives that, it conveys the idea of what's happening. And so for older kids, um, actually, this time I did it with a Google Doc that I just shared with them all via email because um, we can do that all now. And so you can put links in there as well so they could click and look at the website of where we were going to have a read about it or find more about it. Again, I think I mentioned the flexibility within the structure before too, and I'm going to go next into exactly how to do that. But I think it's really good to still build in some choices. And so, for example, for that, it might be to not have a fixed itinerary of what you want to do the full time. And some days kids get to have the choice about whether they'd like to go to this place or that place. Um, and so it lets you be able to keep the kids engaged, and maybe even think about, yeah, how much they can handle and whether they need rest time in there as well. It could be something familiar like going to the pool at the hotel or going to the local playground, just so that it's something familiar that your kids, so that means not every activity is a challenge or, you know, or really outside their comfort zone. How I do the flexibility within that structure is two main things, and one is alternating days. And I do that by thinking maybe a bit more about if one day is an adult focus day or something that the adults want to do, or something that requires a lot of waiting or patience, like if you have to line up for stuff, or if it's in museums where maybe takes a long while to walk through. Then keep the next day kid focused. And so that's because then I think you don't get that build up of annoyance or resentment on the kids' part that can come from doing activities they don't like for a couple of days in a row. Um, I think also it helps them if they've got things to look forward to throughout the trip as well. So if they know they're doing this thing today because it's mum's choice or dad's choice, but tomorrow we're going to, you know, wherever it might be, because it's the child's choice, they get something to look forward to. I have done so many strange things on holidays because it's been my kid's choice and never regretted it. So one time we were in the US and we were in Washington, um, I think Washington, DC, which my son told me it stands for Washington Dust City back when he was young. But we it was his birthday on the trip. And so we said, what do you want to do on your day? You can choose. And so he had looked up, I think he was probably around 10 or so, the largest outdoor escalator in the Northern Hemisphere. he found, and it was in a train station in the outer suburbs of Washington. There was absolutely no other reason to go there, but do you know what? That's what we did for that day. So we all, and I just saw the photo of it the other day come up on our um, kind of rotation in the kitchen, and everyone was smiling. He was so excited, this picture on this big escalator. And so I think peppering those things for kids to look forward to throughout really helps. That's also my tip for then on each day, how to sandwich the boring with the fun. And so if there's an activity that, it's not just even adults, but there's usually an activity that one kid might like, but the other one doesn't like. And so whether it's art galleries, museums, wine tasting, whatever, then maybe put it in through put in there some kid-friendly stops as well. And so my favorite thing to do is look for things like a lolly shop or a chocolate shop, or if you're going somewhere with cold weather, make hot chocolate stops throughout the day. So you've kind of got that. Again, it's something for the kids to look forward to, but it's also alternating the bits that they might find boring and unenjoyable with the bits that they find fun. And playgrounds is another one. Um, you can find them in all places, and the kids generally like to have unstructured time where they can just do what they want to do. So alternating the days to make sure there's, some really fun kid days in there, but then also each day sandwiching the boring bits between some fun stops as well. This holiday, oh, actually, that's another thing I learned on this holiday. One of my kids, you know, 2 out of 3 of them are teenagers now, but even at that teenager level, were like, "Can we have a kids' day?" So they just wanted one day where they got to choose what to do. Um, so having a kids' day is, a new thing that we talked about this time, and that was my kids' idea, and so tried to make that happen. One thing I learned is that, and I wanted to say yes to that, but one thing I learned is that without thinking that through in advance, it was a little difficult to execute. So, for example, he had some ideas that then we were like, oh, well, but we would have had to book that, so we can't do that. They ended up finding, oh, actually, they went 10-pin bowling, which was really fun. But the other thing they did was find a dead rat floating in the river. That was the highlight of Kids' Day for them. So, gosh, who knew? But yeah, so my advice would be to maybe pick the day that's going to be, and then get them to have a think about it, and maybe even look up some things that they want to do, so that if it's something they have to book in advance, you can help with that. But Kids' Day, that's the other cool tip. So then the other thing that I learned, I think is important, is about thinking about the kids' emotions as well. And so for me and my family, it's ADHD, is typically comes up is boredom, but then what also happens is stress as well. And that's just because everyone's out of their comfort zone. It's because we're a family of five, which means sometimes five opinions about what to do. And so we need problem solving, and sometimes there's sibling um, friction and that kind of thing. So I'll talk about boredom first and then the stress reduction. Uh, Two ideas I have here. The first thing is to use the resources that are available for travel, um, because lots of museums, art galleries, and we've been to zoos before as well, have free downloadable kids guides, activity sheets or scavenger hunts. And this is a great way to get your kids excited, but also it provides information that can help with them to not feel so stressed. But also, they've got stuff to read and look at, so that they're not as bored when they're doing these things. The other thing I'd really recommend is seeing if they have kids tours. because I think if you're going to go, say, for example, even going to an art gallery, a lot of the times, if you do the kids tour, the guides will pitch things at the kids level and the kids' interests. You don't feel as lost going through the whole place. You just kind of go to the high dopamine or high octane points for the kids. It can be a bit shorter, and sometimes they are able to cut through lines and that kind of thing. And so I think my husband and I always have this um, rule of thumb when we go traveling about if it's worth spending more money on, if it's going to keep everybody happy and engaged. We'd rather do less things or visit less places, but have it be enjoyable for everybody than to hit everything and just everyone's frazzled at the end. Um, and so you can print that stuff. I've done that when the kids were little. I've downloaded things onto our family iPad before as well, so that then, um, when we're transiting, so on planes or on trains, when there's not much else to do, they can look at all that information as well. Often, because it's a kids guide as well, it's not just information. They'll have activity sheets like a word search or a games and activities built into that stuff. So it's a great thing to have to help keep kids busy. And then the other thing is just thinking about games and activities that you can take along as well, which might seem like an obvious one, but sometimes it's easy to forget to pack these things. And so card games is a great one. We love Phase 10. The Mind is another good one. Chameleon are all games our family play, and they're small enough to bring. Uno. This time it was actually just a pack of cards, and there was a bit of poker played across the families traveling with us. And magic tricks as well. So the kids were kind of teaching each other different magic tricks that they knew and trying to perfect that or play around with it. So just a deck of cards was really useful. The other thing you can do is, made up games. So they were all playing that kind of I went to a picnic and I brought this kind of game. And so even into teenage years and older, if you can have that sense of fun around it and find a game that you like and they like, that can be really handy. So, ways to beat the boredom is a good idea. The other bit I wanted to mention was reducing stress as well. And so, um, I think all of the other things I've mentioned really helps with that. So, preparing, having a schedule, pacing out the days, and being really considerate of what is preferred or unpreferred for your kids, and really trying to get a balance there. Beating boredom is a great thing because once kids are bored, they become upset or frustrated and dysregulated, and that's really tricky. Um, and again, downtime is really helpful as well. Sometimes some kids might be, will say, "No, we're not going to do that plan. Everyone else can go and do that, but I'm going to stay home with this kid because he just needs a break." Um, and you know, it's not missing out. If you go and everyone's stressed and it turns pear shaped, that's no fun anyway. So you may as well just chill out sometimes with your kid, and it's better for the holiday and the family overall. But these are the two rules that I've been using since going with the kids when they were quite little. My the first one is a some kind of like system for the wanderers in the group. One of my kids is a wanderer. I'm quite happy in very crowded Japan to walk ahead of me and the rest of the family by a big distance and not look back. So, something like a bright backpack is what I used when he was young, so I could always see him in there. Um, but some way to have your kids easy to spot in the crowd helps with safety and your peace of mind. But then we had to implement a rule by when it's busy and where I call it transit. So when we're kind of moving from one place to the other and it's busy, you got to hold my hand. Um, And so that was when he was young. If that fell apart, then the bright backpack helped. I have seen recently things like reels on Instagram where people have worn a big headband with a big yellow arrow that points down to where they are. That was like friends not wanting to lose each other at a concert. I really don't think my kids would be open to wearing that. If, I probably would if I was like at the front of the group and they were all behind me and then another adult was at the back. I would not be um put off by wearing a massive headband so they could always find me. But something like that that helps reduce that panic. Um, but the other biggest thing too that we have is that we never did problem solving in that transit time, and so that's often when one of the kids would come up and say, "Oh, what are we doing?" or "Oh, I don't want to do that," or and I would say, we're just not going to do talking now while we're transiting or while we're no problem solving while we're in transit. So we wait until everyone's through those crowded places and the group are back together again before we tackle any disagreements or worries and that kind of thing. And those are ones that I still find are useful today because it's it's just too hard sometimes to manage the worries and the disagreements, but um all the concerns people have, but then that way my kids know that i I'm not dismissing them. We are going to talk about it, but we just need to get through this little period of time now where it's stressful and crowded and that kind of thing. And it might be too the same rule we have, for example, when you're trying to buy tickets on the train or you're trying to work out the public transport systems and stuff like that. It's a time where I say we're not going to talk about that now, but once we've worked all this out and we're at our destination, we can chat. So I think those would be my top tips. Um, above beyond that, I think just the usual parenting stuff about listening and reassuring is great, and doing active listening. So that means making space for questions. Kids might be worrying about stuff that you don't anticipate. Um, don't assume that silence means calm as well. Sometimes a quiet child is worrying. And so you might be able to, just check in with your kids, feeling okay, and listen and reflect back. Or, you see you're quiet, you just relaxed, or are you a bit stressed? And keeping those lines of communication open is a great thing to do. So, traveling, I find really fun. I think traveling with kids who have different needs is never going to be stress free, but it doesn't have to be stressful the whole time. And I think a lot of parents worry about how their kids would go. I mean, I've talked to lots of parents like that who maybe have a holiday like 12 months in advance and they're thinking, I don't know how my kid's going to cope. And so I hope for those parents, this goes a little bit towards thinking about what to anticipate and how to maybe address that. Because I think with a bit of preparation, some flexibility, and a willingness to see things from your child's perspective can turn a trip from stressful or exhausting to really memorable and a great opportunity to connect with your child, especially if you can find stuff for them to do that's around their particular interests. It's a really great bonding activity. And yeah, in the best possible way. So I'd love to hear your best travel tips as well. Connect with me on Instagram at Leanne Tran Psychology, or send an email through the website if you've got tips, because love to be able to add that to our blog section. And if we get heaps of tips, maybe it can even be a full podcast episode where we run through all of the other things that other families do, because all kids are different, which means all family strategies need to be different. Um, I am really excited to be back. It was a great holiday, but at the same time, I'm excited to be back working with the families I work with again and offering or taking another group through chaos to calm soon so that we can unpack all of the kind of things that can help your family be a calm, well-functioning, happy family. So get in touch if that's something that seems good to you. Thanks for tuning in again, and I will catch you next episode.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Parent Like a Psychologist. If you found it helpful, please share on Instagram so other parents can benefit too, and tag me at Leanne Psychology so that I can say a big thank you. Head over to leannetran.com.au to join the village for bite-sized psychology tips straight to your inbox. I really hope this podcast has brought a new perspective and you a step closer towards a calm parent and a thriving child. Have a delightful day.